Anybody else have any questions, any areas of the county I can either answer for you or make something good up to try to tell you? Sam, yes, sir.
Are you going to have the commissioners? Are the commissioners' court going to meet at 9 o'clock now instead of 10 o'clock? Or have you made up your mind about that?
Yeah, I've made up my mind, and I learned a valuable lesson about that. When you start changing court times, there's a lot of other people that need to know, evidently, especially your county court at law judge that has court scheduled at 9 o'clock. I didn't realize that she would schedule court within a 1 hour time period, but yeah, when she walked in and we were all sitting there in the middle of a commissioner's court meeting, I had a lot of groveling to go up and do. But actually, it's that's what you get to learn. And little things that you think are very minor have a pretty sweeping effect. Nobody even bothered to look at the times because they'd been in 10 o'clock for so long. But we actually just bumped it up a little bit because we were heading to Austin, and thought, well, no big deal. It's posted on the timesheet. I even got a call from the reporter from Kerry Craig about 9:05. As we were saying the pledge, my phone was ringing. It was Kerry just asking if there was anything on the agenda for that day. So he hadn't even read the time change. But yes, and we are going to post it and actually adopt it at this meeting that we are going to 9 o'clock. It's going to help a whole lot of people around and actually help the commissioners get back on the roads a little sooner. And even Kerry Craig said it actually let him get his articles out instead of getting up in the middle of the meeting and leaving and trying to put half an article out there. So a lot of good things, a lot of changes that need to be made. Need to take a little bit more time and notice, evidently, in the county. It's not quite as easy to do as just snapping your fingers and having it done. But actually, we do have Erwin Cain. He has just walked in, so. Erwin, I'm going to yield the rest of my time to you. I think some people might want to hear from you, but I have already warned them about these unfunded mandates, and I've already given them a list of things to call you about. So.
How are y'all doing? It's good to be back in the land of the normal. I guess Chris has told you about the mandates. I've got some really good news. We have $165 billion to spend in this state. That's more than every country in the world, except for 10. And we're not broke. So we have a lot of money to spend. The problem is we want to spend more than we have. And so there's some of us down there that are really trying to make sure that we balance this budget without raising taxes. There wasn't a single one of you during 13 months that told me to raise taxes. And I've had a few people in my office recently that have been telling me to raise taxes, but nobody from the district. And there's that sentiment is the same among most of the freshmen that are down there, and most of the Republicans as well. So we're gonna make some hard choices, but I think you're going to find at the end of the day that the sky's not going to fall in, and that we're really going to lead Texas out of this morass, and hopefully lead the country out of it as well, because all eyes are on Texas right now. And with any luck, maybe the federal government will take some pages from our playbook once we're able to do this. I was fortunate enough to, we had our committee assignments a couple of weeks ago, and I was fortunate enough, I don't know, maybe Beth already told you all, or Donnie or somebody about it. Yeah. Well, when I went down to Austin, I was trying to develop a task force that would be structured along the lines of figuring out ways that we could limit the number of bills that could be passed, or to try to find efficiencies to just generally downsize the size of government. I mean, it just boggled the imagination that every 2 years we pass 1,500 new laws that we impose on us. It's getting to the point where ignorance of the law is an excuse. I mean, who can know it? You could, if you want to read the U.S. Code, you can commit yourself to reading 700 pages a day, and in 2,500 years you'll be able to read it. I mean, that's the number of laws we have in the federal level. And I just don't want to see the state level get that big. So I was trying to develop this task force, and then the Speaker's office decided that we were going to reinstitute a committee that we actually had several cycles ago. It was called Government Reform and Efficiency, or Government Efficiency and Reform. And the moment that I heard that, I knew that I wanted to be on that committee. So I lobbied real hard and ended up on that committee. And our whole purpose is to number one, ask a question, and that is, is this something that government should be doing in the first place? Because government, oftentimes in government it seems that we pass a bill or establish an agency because it seems to be the noble thing to do. But that's not what government's mandate is. Government's mandate is to do what it's instructed to do in the Constitution. And there are a lot of good ideas out there that government's funding that government ought not be embroiled in the first place. And so what we're trying to do is to identify what those are. And the unfortunate aspect of that is that sometimes if you're cutting expenses or you're cutting programs, there are jobs that are associated with that. And so we have to ask ourselves a fundamental question. Is government in the business of creating jobs? Is that what it's mandated to do? Well, what's it mandated to do?
Defend the shores,
Yeah.
carry the mail, and stay out of the way.
That's right. Do the kind of things that we can't do for ourselves. Secure the borders, coin money, protect you against me, or me against you, protect property rights, things like that. Those are the government's mandates. And so those are the kind of things that the government ought to be doing based on what is mandated to do, not necessarily what might be a philanthropic task. So that's the way we're looking at number one, what is government's role? And then number two is, if it is a program that the government ought to be spending money on or engaged in, how do we do that as efficiently as we can? How do we do that in a way where we know we're going to get our biggest bang for the buck? Do we do it with an agency? Do we do it with private enterprise? Do we do it with a private public partnership? Do we rely on charities and philanthropic organizations? How do we best do that? And and then we figure out what we need to do. We have to figure out how best to fund it. Do we block grant it? Do we do it on incentive, or do we do it on progress? What's the best way to get the funding? And then we got to figure out ways to make sure that it's accountable. Do we have finally employment at will for the state? Because sometimes when you have a state employee, it's very difficult to fire them, no matter how good they are or how bad they are. Things like having budgets online so that the public can see where we're spending money. Just finding ways of accountability so that when we do actually set up a program, we can assess exactly what we're doing with it, what it's costing us. And then finally figuring out a way to circle back around later on and make sure we keep it efficient. Make sure that we are able to keep it in a lean program. Because I'll give you an example. Have you ever wondered why the state pays more for things than anybody else does? Ever since I was a kid, I couldn't understand that. I mean, the state and the federal government spend more money than anybody else. They ought to be getting the best deals than anybody else, right? They ought to be contracting deals better than Walmart. But they don't. And so one of the things we're working on is doing some reforms in the actual purchasing process at the state, so the state can, for example, do more bulk buying. I mean, if every agency is going to use pens and pencils, then why shouldn't we buy them all in bulk for every agency in the state and get a better deal? The comptroller's estimated that if we can reform our buying process, we could save hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's a lot of money in my neck of the woods. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. I also was able to get on the corrections committee. Although I didn't ask for that, it's kind of an interesting committee because it gives me an opportunity to work on some of the financial reforms and other reforms we need in the penal system, like trying to reform the Texas Youth Commission, which is a virtual black hole. And so we got some exciting things working there. So I just want you to know I'm working hard down there. I hear a lot of people saying, we want you to balance the budget, but don't defund me. And, I mean, everybody has an ox that's going to get gored, I guess. Yeah, and I was elected by the Republican caucus to serve on the the Republican Policy Committee, and that committee is basically designed to help us structure our strategies and our key pieces of legislation that we want to usher through the legislature this cycle, as well as brief every morning every bill that's going to be on the floor and get a general assessment of how we all kind of want to vote on it, so we can go in a unified fashion and make the floor debate as streamlined as we can. So it's a pretty busy process. You learn to exist on less sleep than you're used to down there. But they feed you pretty good. Everybody wants to feed you. You have a lot of new best friends down there, you know. Sometimes I feel like I'm getting fattened for the slaughter. But that's pretty much it.